Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
It started like any other episode of The View. Joy Behar was cracking jokes, Whoopi was holding court, and the audience was buzzing. But no one expected what would happen when Carrie Underwood took her seat that morning. The country music superstar, known for her poise and calm nature, was there to talk about her latest film soundtrack, a project that just happened to star a 67-year-old actress in the lead role. But when Joy Behar turned the conversation toward Hollywood's obsession with youth, things took a sharp, uncomfortable turn. Should older actors really be getting more lead roles, Joy asked, her trademark smirk in place. I mean, audiences want fresh faces, not flashbacks. Carrie's smile didn't fade, but something shifted in her eyes. What followed wasn't just a debate, it was a collision between two generations of entertainment philosophy. The audience didn't know whether to laugh, clap, or hold their breath. Cameras caught every flicker of tension as Joy leaned in, and Carrie stood her ground with grace and conviction. By the time it was over, the segment had gone viral. Viewers weren't just talking about acting anymore. They were talking about respect, representation, and what it truly means to age with dignity in an industry that often pretends not to see you. Before we dive into this clash, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Also, comment your thought on, should older actors be given more lead roles? Now, back to the show. The cameras rolled, the lights glared, and the energy inside the View studio was sharp but inviting. Whoopi Goldberg opened with her usual charm. All right, folks, let's welcome a true powerhouse, Grammy winner, country legend, and all-around icon, Carrie Underwood. The audience erupted in applause. Carrie stepped onto the stage, dressed in a tailored cream blazer and soft curls, her expression calm but radiant. She waved warmly to the crowd, thanking them with that familiar Oklahoma sincerity. "Carrie, it's great to have you," Whoopi said. "You're promoting a new soundtrack for Second Wind, right? A film led by an actress who's, let's be honest, a little older than Hollywood usually allows in a starring role." Carrie smiled. "That's right. It's starring Helen Lawson. She's 77, and she's incredible. She carried that movie with more heart than anyone half her age could." The audience clapped, impressed by Carrie's genuine tone. But sitting to her left, Joy Behar tilted her head, already gearing up. "Well, it's an interesting topic," Joy said, leaning into her mic. "Hollywood's always been about energy, about newness. You think audiences really want to see 70-year-olds playing the romantic leads?" A few chuckles rippled through the audience. Carrie didn't flinch. "I think audiences want good stories. They want truth, and sometimes truth looks like laugh lines and wisdom." Sonny Hostin nodded. "That's a fair point, Carrie, but it's true that studios focus on what sells. Maybe they think younger faces sell better." Carrie turned toward Sonny, her voice soft but firm. "Maybe, but who decided that? Because I've been to shows with audiences crying over older actors who still have fire in them. They connect in ways youth sometimes can't." Joy crossed her arms. "I'm not saying older actors can't act, honey. I'm saying Hollywood's a business. People want to escape when they watch movies, not be reminded of their bad knees." Laughter broke out from a few in the crowd, but others booed softly. Carrie let the noise pass, her composure unshaken. "But isn't that what art is supposed to do? Reflect life, not hide from it?" Whoopi, sensing the sparks, chuckled. "We're getting spicy already." Joy smirked. "I'm just being real. Look, I love Meryl Streep as much as the next person, but if she starts playing a 30-year-old's love interest, I'm walking out of the theater." Carrie raised a brow, leaning forward slightly. "But what about Clint Eastwood? He was still getting romantic leads in his 70s, and nobody blinked. Why is it inspiring for men, but unrealistic for women?" That line hit home. A rumble moved through the audience. Gasps, murmurs, nods. Joy blinked, taken aback, but not defeated. Clint, that's different." "Different how?" Carrie pressed, but her tone remained steady, almost kind. Joy fumbled for a moment, laughing it off. "It's not personal, Carrie, it's just entertainment. The young drive the market." "Then maybe the market's lost its soul." The words hung in the air. Whoopi exhaled dramatically, pretending to wave away the tension. "Well, we just started and it's already Sunday sermon time," she joked. The audience laughed, grateful for the pressure release. Carrie chuckled lightly too, but she didn't back down. "Look, I'm not here to start a fight, but I do think there's something deeply wrong with how we treat age, especially for women. Hollywood acts like turning 50 is an expiration date, and it's heartbreaking to see legends pushed aside just because someone younger trends better online. The sincerity in her voice softened the womb. Even Joy tilted her head, watching her with a mixture of irritation and reluctant respect. Sunny Hostin interjected gently. "You've worked with actors across generations, right, Carrie? What's it like being on set with someone like Helen Lawson?" Carrie smiled, visibly lighting up. "It's inspiring. She's fearless. She's been through the highs and lows, but when she's in front of that camera, she's alive. There's no filter, no pretending. I wish more studios would remember what that kind of authenticity feels like." Anna Navarro, who had been mostly quiet, leaned in. "Do you think audiences would respond if more older actors were given lead roles again?" Carrie nodded. "Absolutely. If you give people depth, they'll show up. People are starving for stories that make them feel, not just scroll." The audience applauded again, this time louder. Joy looked around, trying to reclaim the rhythm. "Okay, but let's be real here. Hollywood's not a charity. It's not about who deserves it, it's about what sells. And maybe that's why it's losing its touch with its soul." The audience oohed loudly, and even Whoopi whistled. The tension now hummed through the air, subtle, steady, but undeniable. Joy leaned back, her smirk hiding something sharper underneath. Carrie, poised and centered, folded her hands, ready for whatever came next. The crowd could feel it. This wasn't just going to be a polite disagreement. This was the opening act of something much deeper. The discussion picked up speed when Joy leaned forward, her tone sharp but still wrapped in that trademark humor. "Carrie, I get it. You want to see older actors in more roles. But Hollywood isn't a charity, it's a business. People go to the movies for fantasy, not reality. They want youth, beauty, and escape. That's what sells." Carrie took a slow breath, the camera catching the tension in her jaw. "That's not entirely true, Joy. People also want stories that feel real. They want depth. You can't tell me a woman over 50 doesn't have stories worth putting on screen. Some of the best performances in film history came from actors who weren't 20 anymore." Joy smirked. "Sure, but those are exceptions. Meryl Streep, Helen Mirren, legends. But you can't expect every 60-year-old to headline a Marvel movie." The audience laughed, but it didn't lighten the air. Carrie didn't flinch. "You're missing the point. It's not about giving everyone a superhero suit. It's about not pretending people stop existing once they pass a certain age. You've got scripts being written by 20-somethings who don't even know what love looks like after kids, after loss, after a real life lived. Hollywood keeps recycling the same faces because it's scared to grow up." Sunny Hostin nodded quietly beside them. "She's got a point," she said. "When you look at shows like Grace and Frankie or films like The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, they do really well. People connect with those stories." Joy rolled her eyes a little bit. "Yeah, but those are niche audiences. You're not packing theaters with retirees." Carrie turned to her, voice firm but calm. "That's because the industry doesn't even try. You can't say an audience doesn't exist when you've never offered them a story that speaks to them." A murmur went through the crowd. Someone clapped softly from the back row and more followed. Joy caught it, smiled wryly and said, "Oh, we've got some Carrie fans in the house." Carrie smiled back, but her voice held weight. "It's not about me. It's about respect. There are actors out there, some of the best we have, who've been quietly written off. They built this industry, Joy, and now they're being told they're too old to matter." Whoopi Goldberg jumped in, her tone trying to balance things out. "Well, I've seen it firsthand. It's not easy. You reach a certain age and suddenly you're not the mother, you're the grandmother, or worse, not in the script at all. And that hurts." Carrie looked toward her. "Exactly. Imagine any other career where your experience becomes a reason to sideline you." Joy crossed her arms. "I don't think it's that simple. Look, I'm older than both of you, and I'm still working. But I don't expect Hollywood to bend around me. You adapt or you fade out. That's just life." Carrie's tone softened, but her words hit deeper. "It's not about bending the system, Joy. It's about building one that doesn't erase people once they've earned their wisdom. You can't tell stories about life if you keep pretending only the first 30 years of it count." The tension simmered. Joy opened her mouth to reply, but paused when the crowd applauded again, louder this time. "Let's be real," she said, half grinning, half defensive. "Hollywood's not ageist, it's image-driven, always has been." Sonny added, "But that image problem is exactly what's making people feel invisible, older women especially. You can't deny that." Carrie leaned forward. "You know, Joy, I think you of all people should understand this. You fought your whole career to be heard in rooms that didn't take you seriously at first. Isn't that the same fight older actors are having now?" The audience went quiet. For a moment, Joy didn't respond. Then she gave a small nod. "Maybe, but it's still a fight you have to pick wisely." Carrie's reply was simple. "Or maybe it's one you shouldn't have to fight at all." The camera cut to Whoopi, who sighed and said, "Well, that's the line of the morning right there." The studio broke into applause again. Joy forced a smile, clearly irritated, but keeping her composure. "Look, Carrie, I get your heart's in the right place. You want everyone to have a fair shot. But the world doesn't work that way." Carrie looked her dead in the eye. "Then maybe it's time it did." The camera zoomed in slightly, catching the electricity between them. The contrast was striking. Joy's seasoned, jaded realism against Carrie's passionate belief that things could still change. "Let me ask you something, Joy," said Carrie. "Would you take a back seat if a younger singer came along and people said, 'Carrie, step aside, you've had your time'?" Carrie didn't blink. "If that younger singer earned it, sure. But if she got it just because she looked better in an Instagram ad, no. I'd fight for the art. And that's what I'm saying. Older actors aren't asking for favors, they're asking for fairness." The audience applauded again, some even standing. Joy chuckled dryly. "You're a tough one, I'll give you that." Carrie smiled. "I learned from watching women like you." Joy blinked, thrown for a second. That line landed differently, less like an attack, more like truth. Whoopi looked from one to the other and said, "All right, I think we've got fire on both sides of the couch today." The segment break music started to roll, but the camera lingered on Carrie and Joy for a few seconds longer. Two women from different generations locked in a silent stare that said everything words couldn't. The clash wasn't over yet, but by now, everyone watching could tell. This wasn't just about movies. It was about worth, visibility, and who gets to stay in the story once the spotlight moves on. The next segment opened with a noticeable charge in the air. The studio audience could feel it. The polite debate had turned into something more personal. Carrie sat upright, her expression calm but intent. Joy crossed her legs, arms folded, eyes sharp. Whoopi gave a little chuckle, half joking, half bracing herself. "All right," Whoopi said. "Before the break, Carrie made a strong case for celebrating older actors. Joy, I could tell you weren't exactly convinced. You want to respond?" Joy leaned forward, her voice steady but pointed. "I just think we're romanticizing the past here. Everyone wants to believe Hollywood should be fair. But it's a market. You can't force audiences to love what they don't buy. I'm not saying older actors don't deserve respect. I'm saying the audience decides what sells." Carrie looked at her for a long second, then said quietly, "You mean the audience you've taught to worship youth? Because that didn't happen naturally, Joy. The system built it that way." That landed hard. A few audience members gasped. Joy frowned. "Oh, come on. You can't blame me for that." Carrie shook her head. "Not you personally, but the media, the studios, the constant message that aging is a failure. It starts young. You hit 30, and suddenly you're being told to pivot or reinvent yourself, like you've expired. It's not just actors, it's every woman watching this show." A hush fell across the studio. Even Whoopi stopped fidgeting. Carrie continued, her voice low and sincere. "When I started in music, I was told to keep my image fresh. Don't age, don't talk about certain things, smile more. And I did it, because I was scared. Scared that if I didn't fit their version of marketable, I'd disappear.
I can't imagine what that pressure feels like when you're 60 and still just as passionate about your craft. Joy took a breath, clearly caught between defensiveness and reflection. You're talking about insecurity, not injustice. Everybody feels that, male or female, old or young. Carrie's reply came sharp. No, Joy. Men don't lose their jobs at 40 because of a wrinkle. Men get called distinguished. Women get called past their prime. That's not insecurity, that's bias. Applause broke out again, stronger this time. Joy forced a smile. You're making it sound like a conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy, Carrie said. It's a pattern. You look at award nominations, at casting lists, at studio budgets. The opportunities dry up for older women, no matter how talented they are. That's not coincidence, it's design. Joy tried to laugh it off. You've been spending too much time on social media. Hollywood's tough on everyone. Carrie leaned forward. Maybe that's the problem. We accept tough as normal. But it's not normal to erase people who still have something powerful to offer. A hush fell across the studio. Even Whoopi stopped fidgeting. Carrie continued, her voice low and sincere. I think what Carrie's saying connects to a bigger issue. It's not just Hollywood. It's the message society sends about age. You hit 50 and suddenly you're told your best years are behind you. But that's not true for anyone with purpose. Carrie nodded. Exactly. Some of the best songs I ever wrote came from pain I couldn't have understood at 25. The same should be true for acting. Life gives you layers, and those layers make stories worth telling. Joy, still holding her ground, said, Sure, but you're ignoring reality. Studios invest in what's bankable. They have to survive, too. Carrie didn't hesitate. Then maybe we redefine what bankable means. Because if storytelling only chases trends, it stops being art. It becomes marketing. The audience erupted. Even Whoopi raised her eyebrow. Okay, Carrie, that was deep. Joy chuckled, half dismissing, half impressed. Well, maybe you should be writing screenplays instead of songs. Carrie smiled faintly. Maybe I should. At least then we'd have some roles for women who don't disappear after their first gray hair. The room went still again. That line wasn't delivered with anger. It was heartbreak disguised as courage, and it hit home. Joy sighed, the kind of sigh that comes from knowing you've hit a nerve and maybe crossed a line, too. Look, I get what you're saying, but don't you think sometimes we hold on too tight? Maybe there's beauty in stepping back and letting the next generation take over. Carrie looked at her gently. There's beauty in mentoring. There's dignity in legacy. But stepping back shouldn't mean being erased. You can pass the torch without being shoved off the stage. That last line drew a long, loud cheer. Even Whoopi leaned back, clapping slowly. Now that's what I'm talking about. Joy looked down at her cue cards, then back up at Carrie. You really believe Hollywood can change? Carrie didn't even blink. I believe people can. And when people demand better stories, the industry will follow. There was a quiet stillness after that. Not tension, something heavier. Reflection. Whoopi broke it gently, saying, You know, this reminds me of something Cicely Tyson said once. Age is not the enemy. Ignorance is. Maybe that's where the conversation really starts? Carrie smiled, eyes glistening slightly. Exactly. Because talent doesn't age, it evolves. The crowd applauded again, but it wasn't just entertainment anymore. Something about the moment felt raw, honest. You could sense it in the silence between claps. Joy finally nodded, half smiling, half defeated. All right, Carrie, I'll give you this one. You've made me think. Carrie smiled back, her tone gracious. That's all I wanted. For a moment, there was mutual respect in the air. Two women from different worlds, realizing they weren't as far apart as they thought. But underneath that calm, the fire hadn't burned out. Joy wasn't done. Not yet. She leaned back, muttering into her mic, "Still doesn't mean I want to see Tom Cruise at 80 running from explosions." The audience burst out laughing. Carrie grinned. "Then maybe let's find better explosions." Even Joy laughed at that one. The crowd rose to its feet, clapping through the transition music. The tension had softened, but the energy lingered, because everyone knew what they'd just seen wasn't just a talk show argument. It was a moment. Carrie hadn't just defended older actors. She'd exposed something deeper, the quiet collective fear of fading, and the courage it takes to fight against it. The air in the studio shifted again. The laughter that had just filled the room faded into an uneasy quiet. Joy Behar leaned back in her chair, a smirk still clinging to her face, but her eyes said something different. She wasn't ready to let this go. All right, Joy said, waving her hand like she was brushing off dust. "I'll admit, Carrie, you make a compelling argument. But you live in a fantasy land if you think Hollywood's ever going to give older women the same opportunities as the younger ones. It's never happened, and it never will." Carrie blinked. Her jaw tightened, but she kept her tone calm. "You know, Joy, people said the same thing about women directing blockbusters or getting equal pay. It'll never happen. But it did, because some people refused to accept never." Joy scoffed, her voice rising slightly. "You're comparing equal pay to casting decisions? Come on. Studios cast who audiences want. They don't owe anyone a career revival." Carrie tilted her head. "No one's asking for charity, Joy. We're asking for fairness, for imagination, for stories that reflect real life, because real life doesn't end at 40. The audience started clapping again, slow at first, then stronger. Joy shot them a look, her trademark sarcasm slipping under her tone. "You know what? Maybe you should run a studio, Carrie. You could cast all your experienced friends in romantic comedies about reading glasses." A few audience members gasped. It wasn't just snark, it was condescending. Carrie's expression didn't change, but her eyes did. They sharpened. "That's exactly the kind of attitude that keeps things stagnant," she said softly. "You turn passion into punchlines. But it's not funny when it means entire generations of women disappear from the screen." The audience applauded again, louder this time. Joy rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, you make it sound like a moral crisis." Carrie didn't flinch. "It is one. Art shapes culture, Joy. When you erase people from art, you erase them from memory." The room fell completely still. Even Joy seemed taken aback by that line. Carrie leaned in slightly, her voice low but unwavering. "Think about it. We grew up watching women like Jane Fonda, Meryl Streep, Angela Bassett, women who taught us strength, complexity, grace. Imagine if they'd been told to fade quietly after 40. What would we have lost? What stories would never have been told?" Joy's lips parted, but she didn't respond. She glanced briefly at Whoopi, maybe hoping to pivot or get a lifeline. Whoopi just raised an eyebrow, silently urging her to keep going. Carrie continued, her tone softening but her conviction deepening. "This isn't about age, it's about respect. For artists, for audiences, for time itself. We all get older. Pretending it's a flaw doesn't make it go away. It just makes people feel invisible." Joy crossed her arms, defensive now. "You're assuming people want to see that kind of realism. Maybe they just want to escape." Carrie nodded slightly. "Escape is fine, but even escapism should have truth. Otherwise, it's hollow. I'd rather see a love story about two 60-year-olds who rediscover each other than another teen superhero movie that teaches kids their value ends when they grow up." The audience burst into applause again, and this time even Sunny Hostin joined in. Joy glanced around, realizing she was losing the crowd. She leaned forward, trying to regain control. "So, what, you think it's ageism if an older actor doesn't get cast? Maybe sometimes it's just talent. Maybe they're not right for the role." Carrie's tone stayed calm, but her words hit like thunder. "Then write roles that are right for them. You don't fix injustice by pretending it's merit-based." The air erupted again. Cheers, claps, even a few whistles. Joy gave a dry laugh, but there was tension behind it now. "You've got all the answers, huh?" Carrie smiled faintly. "No, I just stopped accepting excuses." Joy sat back, shaking her head, pretending to laugh it off, but the flash of irritation on her face was unmistakable. She looked out toward the audience and said, "Well, Carrie, maybe you can fund all those movies when your next tour makes $1 billion." The audience laughed, but it wasn't with joy. It was at the pettiness of the comment. Carrie didn't miss a beat. "Maybe I will. And when I do, I'll call women like you, women with fire, with opinions, and ask you to play roles that show what experience really looks like." That shut the laughter down. Even Joy seemed stunned. Whoopi grinned wide and said, "Oh, that's cold and classy. I like it." Carrie smiled, but her eyes softened. "I don't want to win an argument, Joy. I want us to stop acting like growing older is something to hide. You've built a career being fearless. You, of all people, should understand that." Joy's face softened for the first time. "You really believe it can change?" Carrie nodded. "It already is. Look at this room. Look at the reaction. People are tired of pretending youth is the only story worth telling." For a long, still moment, Joy didn't respond. The camera zoomed in slightly, catching the quiet reflection in her eyes. Then slowly, she gave a small nod, not surrender, but understanding. Whoopi, sensing the weight of the silence, leaned forward. "Well, if we've learned anything today, it's that nobody stays young forever, but maybe we don't need to." Carrie smiled. "Exactly. We just need to stay visible." The audience burst into thunderous applause. It wasn't just polite, it was emotional. You could see people standing up, clapping with real conviction. Carrie looked genuinely moved, blinking back what might have been tears. Joy finally chuckled and said, "All right, you got me, Carrie. I can't argue with that." Carrie laughed softly. "You could, but I'd probably write a song about it." Even Joy laughed, shaking her head. The tension that had filled the room slowly melted into a warm, respectful calm. But behind that light laughter, something deeper had shifted, not just in the studio, but in the people watching from home. It wasn't about fame or career anymore. It was about aging with grace, being seen, being valued. And for the first time in a long time, the View audience didn't just applaud for entertainment. They applauded for truth.
As the segment wrapped, the energy in the studio shifted from charged debate to quiet reflection. The audience was still buzzing, some smiling, others wiping their eyes. Carrie Underwood sat back, the tension leaving her shoulders, while Joy Behar took a deep breath, her expression softer than it had been all morning. Whoopi leaned forward, a knowing grin tugging at her face. "Well," she said, "that was one of those conversations you don't forget." The audience laughed gently, but it wasn't the usual talk show laughter. It was the kind that comes when something real has just happened. Joy nodded slowly, almost reluctant to admit it. "You know, maybe I came at this too cynical. I've been in this business a long time. You get used to thinking things don't change." Carrie turned to her, voice steady but kind. "I get that. But every change starts with someone believing it can. You don't have to be young to still make an impact. You just have to care enough to try." There was a moment of genuine stillness. Joy looked at her, half smiling. "I think you've got away with words, I'll give you that." Whoopi jumped in, laughing. "That's why she writes hit songs, Joy. Maybe she should write your comeback movie, too." The crowd roared with laughter, the tension breaking for good. Even Joy laughed, shaking her head. All right, but only if I get top billing." Carrie smiled. "You've earned it." The laughter faded into warm applause, the kind that fills a room and lingers. Carrie glanced out at the audience, clearly touched. "I know this got heated, but I'm glad it did. Sometimes the hardest talks are the ones that matter most." Joy nodded again, her tone softer. "You know, maybe it's not about giving older actors more roles. It's about giving them better ones." Carrie smiled. "Exactly." The camera panned slowly across the hosts, catching their thoughtful expressions. Whoopi, ever the closer, looked straight at the lens. "You heard it here, folks. We all age, but stories don't have to. Keep telling them. Keep living them." The audience erupted one last time. Cheers, claps, a few standing to show appreciation. As the credits began to roll, Carrie reached over and gave Joy's hand a light squeeze. Joy squeezed back, just enough to say no hard feelings. And for a brief, rare moment on live television, The View didn't feel like a talk show. It felt like a conversation the whole country needed to hear.